Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today I will review Philip K. Dick's book, The Man Whose Teeth Were All Exactly Alike. Much like the book Confessions of a Crab Artist, in this book Dick turns his attention to something intimate and in this case very uncomfortable, suburban marriage. The book was written in 1960 but not published until 1984, and it belongs to Dick's more neglected body of realist non-science fiction novels. These works were long dismissed as failed attempts at literary respectability, too bleak and too strange for the mainstream market. In these books, Dick isn't interested in explosive events. He is interested in the slow corrosion of character. Let's dive into it. The story centers on two neighboring couples living in Marin County, California in the 1950s. Leo and Janet Runcible and Walt and Sherry Dombrosio. On paper, they represent mid-century American normalcy, married, childless, financially sound and socially respectable. But almost immediately the veneer begins to crack. Leo Runcible, a liberal Jew, is a real estate agent looking to sell a house to a couple who plans to move to the area. When the couple comes to visit Runcible to close the deal, they spot his neighbour Dombrosio having a black person over at their house. They ask Runcible whether there are black people living in the community. Runcible explodes at the prejudice, makes a scene, and subsequently loses the business that he was hoping to make. It's a small incident, but it sets the tone. Everyone in this neighborhood is hypersensitive to reputation. Suburbia here is a stage, and everyone is painfully aware of their audience. When one day soon after, his neighbor Dombrosio drives his car into a ditch near his house, he calls the authorities on him and reports him for drunk driving as a way of getting back with him. This leads to Dombrosio to lose his license, and that's where things start to go downhill for both couples. What fascinated me is how Dick portrays identity as performance. The characters speak one way publicly, another way privately, and in their own minds they have these crazy monologues going about their spouses. Their true colours come out in spastic, dramatic and borderline psychotic intermarital scenes. That fragmentation is true Philip K. Dick, even without the science fiction apparatus. If the novel were only about suburban pettiness, it would already be a good book, but Dick pushes it further into the absurd. Walt Dombrosio, insecure, misogynistic, manipulating, and increasingly resentful, becomes convinced that Leo Runcible is responsible for his professional and personal humiliation. His solution is to plant fake Neanderthal remains on Leo's property in an effort to discredit him and cause chaos. Runcible takes the bait. He's overambitious. He plants stories in the local newspapers about his find and commits archaeology departments to do research on the remains. The Neanderthal hoax is ridiculous on the surface, but it feels like perfect externalization of Walt's interior life. In a way, it is Walt's repressed anger that is being excavated. The archaeological thread also gives the novel an eerie undercurrent. The past is rotting and festering in the soil beneath idealized suburban homes, and on the face of it, one cannot make out much of a difference between Neanderthal and modern man. It seems civilization might have developed technology-wise, but we haven't evolved morally at all. Nothing much seems to have changed since we hit each other over the head with clubs. What truly anchors the novel is its exploration of masculinity under threat. Walt's unravelling begins when his wife Sherry seeks employment. This seemingly small act destabilizes his identity altogether. He quits his own job partly out of wounded pride and then grows to resent his wife for becoming, in his mind, the man of the house. Eventually, this leads to assaulting his wife and her becoming pregnant. This very graphic passage is unusual for Dick connoisseurs. The most difficult sections of the novel occur within the marriages. Dick ventures into territory that feels startlingly raw for a novel written in 1960. Reading these passages is uncomfortable, disturbing, and one wonders how much of the domestic violence portrayed in this book was based on Dick's own experience. At any rate, we are confronted with a very real mid-century anxiety. What happens when the breadwinner model begins to crack? Dick doesn't caricature Walt as pure evil. He portrays him as confused, insecure, and socially conditioned. But he also does not excuse him. The novel is unflinching about how masculine insecurity can metastasize into cruelty. One reviewer describes the book as an exploration of the treacherous landscape of gender politics long after World War II, but long before the second wave of feminism. That liminal moment caught between eras is where the novel lives. In that sense, the book is a period piece. The tragedy is not just that Walt fails to adapt, it is that he doesn't even understand what adaptation would mean. What struck me about the book was the emotional whiplash. Walt can declare love and hatred for Sherry in the same breath. Their arguments feel chaotic, but also painfully realistic. Both husband and wife seem to define themselves mostly by what is expected of them socially. They break out of their individual molds at times, only to snap back into them a moment later, rationalizing their behaviors as attempts to fit societal stereotypes. Dick seems deeply aware that marriage can be both refuge and prison, sometimes simultaneously. The pregnancy subplot intensifies this dynamic. Sherry's body becomes another battleground, another site of control and fear. By the time Walt imagines a future in which their child is born malformed due to polluted water, the dread becomes existential. The contamination of the environment mirrors the contamination of the relationship. This isn't a sentimental novel about domestic life. It is a forensic, microscopic study of a society falling to pieces. The revelation that the supposed Neanderthal skull is actually linked to local deformities caused by water pollution adds a layer to the narrative. The community itself is compromised. Its prosperity rests on contamination, but both literal and ethical. Leo's eventual decision to purchase the water company in order to improve water quality is one of the few genuinely principled acts in the novel. Yet this gesture leads to financial ruin and bitterness. He sacrifices for the community but cannot free himself from his personal resentment. I found this ending particularly powerful. There is no moral cleansing, no about turn, no resolution. The marriages do not transform into healthy partnerships. The social tensions remain. The water may improve, but the emotional toxicity of the community sticks. Dick seems to suggest that doing the right thing does not automatically purify one's character. Unlike Dick's science fiction, which often externalizes paranoia into cosmic structures, the man whose teeth were all exactly alike keeps everything disturbingly human. The monsters are not androids or alien forces. They are insecurities, prejudices, and unexamined resentments. This is a book about suburban suffocation of people collapsing under expectations they barely understand, and it's not an easy novel. It is not even particularly pleasant, but it's sharp, observant, and bracingly honest. My suspicion is you either love or hate this book. Personally, I'm in the love camp and give it a 4 out of 5 donkey halls. Dick has us partake in the interior monologues and exterior display of pathologies of 4 individuals, each struggling with their own demons, trying to reconcile their personal needs with the societal shackles that this time period presents. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in my next episode. Bye-bye.